Well, as U.S. Poet Laureate, I work with the Library of Congress, and one of the overarching responsibilities and something I love to do and want to do is to present the Library of Congress to the people of the United States. And one way that I'm doing that is by having my Casa de Colores, House of Colors initiative on the web at the Library of Congress. And it's like inviting everyone to submit poetry, just a handful of words, just a little handful of words, a sprinkle of words, online. It's easy to do. Just look up Casa de Colores. And our first theme is family. So whatever comes to you, whatever you imagine or are inspired by or see or notice or experience that you want to talk about, a little story, perhaps a little poetry poem, little story poem, then you can enter that. And that's going to be on all the time throughout the whole year, the laureate year, and at the Library of Congress. So that's one kind of relationship I want to establish, the public and the library, and have the public's work be at the library, because once you submit it, it's at the Library of Congress. And there's your work. There are your words. How beautiful. And at the same time, people can read it throughout the world. So I love that whole thing. So that's one thing I'm doing. Another one is to give the opening reading, which I did already in the 15th of September. So I already did that, and that's what we do as poet laureates: open up, get inaugurated, and present our material to the beautiful audience in Washington, D.C., whoever wants to come. And then an initiative like this one, Casa de Colores, that I took on. We're not required to do a project, but I'm a kind of a project guy, and I like building new things and exhibiting them and having people get involved. So I did that, and it's just starting, Casa de Colores. And we also get to do a midpoint project at the mid-year level. At the mid-year, in the middle of 8 months, we get to do something: a forum, a talk, a reading, a new kind of presentation to the public at the Library of Congress. And then another thing that we all do, poet laureates, is at the end of the year, we kind of close. We kind of make a closing presentation. So it could be a lecture, it could be another set of readings, or something, a little bit of both. So that's what we also do. And in between all that, we're weaving our words throughout the United States and going to do workshops and readings and meeting classes and peoples, community centers, shaking hands and listening to all people say things that they want to say or ask questions about poetry or about, the writer. And it's like that. So we travel, meet people, say hello, and say, you really are a poet. If you think of poetry as being apart from you, let's start over. Poetry comes from you. And I just want to remind you, okay? And as a matter of fact, we can start right now. And let's do something right now. Or here's Casa de Colores for you to jump into as soon as you can. So I also go about reminding people of their creativity. Well, I find my inspiration and everything, things people say, music, paintings and photographs, and things that take place. Sometimes they're very emotional events, tragic events. Sometimes I hear a phrase in a song, an indie song, a folk song, where I listen to jazz or Jimi Hendrix or blues. But a tip is, you're right about the paper. Sometimes it's the same size and the same color and paper that we learned to use since first grade or maybe third grade, 8.5 by 11, 20-pound bond. Even though things are changing because we have iPads, it's no longer paper. So I suggest use a big old sheet of paper, big old sheet. Just by having a big sheet of paper, you're going to go, oh, what's this? Oh no, geez, wow. You're going to react differently to it. And get a pastel. Don't even use a pencil. Or, forget about the computer for a while. And get a pastel and just start moving your hands across the paper. Writing is moving. It's moving. It's physical movement. Whether it's inside of you or outside of you, it's physical movement. So start moving with color on a large piece of paper. And believe you me, as Jerry Lewis would say, you're going to get very inspired. Just believe you me, you're going to get very inspired by having this big, wild-sized paper or construction paper or a newspaper. Get a newspaper, big old giant sheet with a lot of writing. There's a lot of typing and stories on it. There's photographs of people, very dignified people on it, or models, or items, or a really interesting story, local story. There's a lot of places to write in those on those sheets. You can write around the sofa. You can write on the bottle. You can write around the model's hair or on the person's face. And that's going to get you going because it's like writing in 3 dimensions. So I recommend newspapers, construction paper, large pieces of paper, color pencils and pastels and crayons. And or there's a story. Today it was announced that there's a new school being put up, funds donated by Johnny Bananas and Company. And then you can add to that. You go, donated by Johnny Bananas and Company and me too. By the way, I love school. I went to school. I went to Lowell Elementary. You just tell your little story. You just follow the lines that are already there, printed there, the language there, and add your own story to that. And I lived in San Diego, California, Logan Heights, 1958. Boom. Elvis Presley was singing his new song, Hound Dog. Just put that in there. And it's okay. Because remember, you're a poet. And guess what? We have that thing called poetic license. And guess what? It's all up to you. Those are tips. Different paper, different materials. Add words to words that are already there. And then have fun with them. Add, keep on adding. Doesn't have to be long. It can be middle size or short. And then you can step out and type what you did. You can do a new draft on a formal kind of paper, and you're going to see that you have something most interesting and that you enjoyed. And that's what I recommend. But something I'm going to read to you is called White Dove Found Outside Don Teriyakis. And this is all true. And it's interesting for me to write about a white dove found outside Don Teriyakis. On Cedar and Herndon, going nowhere, brought her home, bought her seeds, a rabbit cage, and carried her out every day, and let her fly in the room next to my bedroom. I was concerned about her. I asked myself, what can I do? She's not happy. She's not free. She dances when I take the cage outside and set it on the angular table. In the breezeway, then the sun waves through and the trees sway before noon when the sister doves, blue jays, call and peck at the seeds she spills. She steps to one side, to the other, and back and forth. She peers at me through the wires. I take her inside. She purrs. She calls. If I release her, she is going to stumble. Then Jack Hawk will shred her. So I'll keep her in the cage. I tell myself. You want to have rhythms more or less established in the poem. Even those can change as you personally read them as a reader. When you're performing the poem out loud, right, the spacing, the pacing, the rhythm, even though it changes every time you read it, because how you feel and where you are and how you're standing and how you're feeling and breathing and how much your blood is circulating and how much oxygen you got going, it's like creating it's like the double poem. There's the words, which comprise the poem and how they're structured, and then the rhythms that you're voicing and breathing, and that's the second poem. So in one poem there's around 5 or 8 or 9 or 10 poems. One poem is just a language, general. The second poem, let's say, are the rhythms that are in the poem. Third poem are the images. Some poems have a lot of images. So you say after reading, I didn't get anything out of that poem. But you may have missed the images. Maybe in that poem, the images were the poem. The red and the brick black and the blue and the gray and the whitish and the gold and the green and the trousers and the way the sun was coming down. Maybe that was the poem. And the other poem in that poem is the spacing. One word is here, and then you have space, 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 and then another word there. And that blank space is also saying something. It's like piano. It's like jazz. The rhythms. So it's the spaces and the pauses. That's the poem too. And also the shape of the poem is the poem. That's another poem. You go, I kind of like this poem. I kind of like the rhythms. There's some interesting spaces in there, but I'm not getting anything out of it. Well, maybe you forgot to look at the way it's constructed on the page. So it's very exciting. E.E. Cummings, the construction is amazing on those poems. You go, oh, I never imagined a poem like that. Oh, what is it? It's like a mobile. It's like a dangling set of skyscrapers. That's the poem right there. If you want to get into the meaning of the words, and please do. If you want to get into the thoughts, please do. The knowledge of the poem, please do. But just perhaps it's the structure that poem really is presenting to you. That poem, the architecture of that poem is the poem also. So that's what's great about poetry. It has many layers. So you have, different moments with it. You can dance 5 dances with one poem. Not just one dance. Do not limit yourself. Dance as much as you can. Foxtrot, jitterbug, tango, rock and roll, and make up your own dance. I love public radio. I grew up in the public radio post-civil rights era, and where everyone wanted to voice out to a larger community in a larger world, and public radio was that world. That was that tunnel, that funnel. That wasn't a tunnel really. It was that great megaphone that we all could have. I've always listened to public radio. It's very important. It's very important because you hear the voices of the people, and you hear it the way the people speak, and you hear the questions that they have. I was on public radio recently, and I said to the caller that came in, I said, what do you recommend that I do as a poet laureate? And she said, I think you should have soldiers. You should do a project with soldiers. I said, why is that? She goes, because they're suffering. They have a lot to say, and there's no outlet for them. And I think poetry would be wonderful for them. And I go, I never thought of that. Thank you. So that's public radio. You get that moment of enlightenment and insight that you wouldn't get in commercial radio. Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Juan Filipe Herrera, a U.S. Poet Laureate. I invite you to listen to WNIJ.
Great. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you for doing it.